I don't think I've ever intentionally tried to solve a problem that I have not experienced. We are doing that now. We are doing most of that now because we have a broader team and we have different departments coming up with different ideas. But the origin of everything I mostly do come from a lived experience, which makes me more passionate. I don't give up when I'm trying to solve those problems because I know I have to. I don't know who else is, but I have to be part of the solution as well. So yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Oh My Curry Goodness. My name is Hamza Islam. On each episode of this podcast, I talk to people across different industries who are primarily those who are Gen Z about their story and the experiences that have shaped them into who they are today. When it comes to interacting with people on my podcast, I've interacted with many entrepreneurs, activists, athletes, and many more. And while it's great to talk about the work that they do, I really want to focus more on the personal journeys because every one of us have had challenges, good and bad experiences that have shaped us into who they are today. So I wanted to create a platform that focuses on the personal story and try to humanize the guest as much as possible. In a weird way, I love curry, so it's great to talk about the dish, but it's more important to talk about the person behind the dish and see what made that dish so special. So continue to check back each and every week to learn from incredible people who are of the Gen Z generation. Now, this week I'm talking to Stanley Anigbogu, who is the founder and CEO of Lighthead, a company that recycles electrical and electronic waste to provide energy solutions to marginalized communities. One of the things that Stanley focuses a lot on is the importance of giving back to communities those who are in need. And it's very easy to take certain things for granted and not realizing that there's other communities that for them it would mean the world. So I'm really excited to speak to Stanley and learn more about his the importance of helping people and also learning about his story, especially when it comes to technology and STEM. So, Stanley Anigbogu, thank you so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure. And I also love Corey as well. So yeah, perfect.
That's awesome. Sorry, I'm just a little cold. That's awesome to hear. Before we do start, because you did talk about that, one of the things in South Asia where my parents are from, our curry is very spicy. What's curry like for you? Is it more spicy? Is it sweet? A combination? Or I guess how would you describe like the curry
Mm.
based on what you've had?
Yeah, so I think Nigerians in general, we love really spicy food rather than sweet spicy. I have had different types of curry, of course, but yeah, I prefer personally more spicy than spicy sweets in general per se. Yeah.
That's really awesome to hear. Now, I've never asked this before, and I know this is gonna sound like a silly question, but on this podcast, I'm known for overthinking and being really ridiculous with my questions. But obviously, I know that technology and STEM plays a big part in you. Is there in any way, like the dish itself, do you feel like curry, the dish, has some sort of symbolic meaning in your personal life? And I know that sounds ridiculous because when it comes to food, it's easy to just look at it as like, oh, it's a dish that I enjoy. I don't really look at it as like any symbolic meaning. But there have been movies I've watched. I think there's a Disney movie called Ratatouille. Don't know if you've seen it.
Mm. I
Um,
have.
Oh, okay. So there's like a particular scene where I think the food critic tries the dish and then it takes him back to memory lane.
Mm.
I'm wondering, do you find any similarity in that, or do you feel like it's just a dish that you really enjoy?
So I don't know about for curry in general. I think I'm from Nigeria. We only get like you have like Indian curry. We do have our own version of like curry sauce, but it's quite different. But yeah, when it comes to food, I love food, so I'll broaden that if that's okay. I think that's a very interesting question. And one of the symbols that food play in my life is preparing it sometimes. I think we all need like the world is always noisy with our own voices, with the voices outside and everything happening. personal and business life. I think the only time I get to switch off entirely is when I'm cooking sometimes. So I think for me, cooking and having others try my food, it's very, very symbolic for me, and it helps me to zone out and focus in the food I'm preparing, making sure everything is balanced. I think it's only in food you find the balance you're looking for. Do you want it spicy? Do you want it sweet? Do you want it more thick, or do you want it more loose? It depends. So yeah, I think food gives me control to balance myself out and switch out and zone out. So yeah.
That's really interesting. Now, I will tell you this. I usually just like to eat curry. I'm not the best at cooking it, although I've tried it. I've tried making it before, and it's a work in progress. I mean, there are times where, you might worry about going to the bathroom. You might worry about it being too spicy, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's a work in progress. So, yeah, but
Yeah.
there'll be a time where I'll make it and there's no problems.
Sure.
Speaking of work in progress and final product, it's similar in a way to the things that you and I have an interest or passion, excuse me, in which is STEM or technology. And before we talk more about light ed and I guess the relationship you have with STEM, the thing that I mentioned in the introduction is that you're very passionate about helping people in general. I mentioned that you're
Yeah.
the founder of Light Ed, but other organizations you've found in the past include ArtecHubs, which is you're giving skills for communities that don't have those basic necessities. There's also an
Mm.
organization called STEM for Her, which is providing tools for women in Africa, because you're based in Africa,
Mm.
the tools they need in the STEM field. So before we talk about STEM, there's the part where you focus a lot on helping people and giving back. Tell me
Yeah.
where that comes from, because it's very easy to maybe do things for yourself. Maybe sometimes people want to help, but maybe there's this sense of like, how do I
Mhm.
help? Where do I go to? What do I do? Where does helping people come from you personally?
I think often whenever people hear about the work I do, they often think it comes from a place of selflessness, actually. But actually comes from a very selfish place, funny enough. And selfish is not in a bad way. It's a good type of selfish. Most of the problems I'm solving are the problems I grew up experiencing. So when you grow up with certain problems, it affects your entire well-being, your physical well-being, even to a point, your mental well-being. I think for Lighted, I grew up with lack of access to energy, and this affected my education, my health as well. And I kind of grew up trying to figure out solutions. And I remember, so I come from a very Catholic family, and you'd go to the prayers early in the morning, like 5 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m., type of early in the morning. And I and my sister used to go for those prayers like way early. We would literally walk in the street and it's dark. And we're like just 11 and 9 year olds like walking in that dark street. And I remember the first lamp I built was out of a old plastic container from my mom's makeup kit. And I put like a battery, a recycled LED, and that was what we used to light up the way. And turned that into a small business in school. But yeah, so I think it comes from a simple place. I want to solve the problems I grew up experiencing, making sure that other people don't experience that problem. And I think that's where selflessness comes in. But then from the STEM perspective, I also grew up watching a lot of amazing movies like Iron Man, and I always wanted to build those things, but I faced a huge challenge, and that was the lack of tools to make those solutions a reality or those ideas a reality. So I decided, why don't I make or design solutions that help make those ideas that other kids will have a reality easier for them than it was for me. So yeah, I think that's what I meant by selfishness. I don't think I've ever intentionally tried to solve a problem, that I have not experienced. We are doing that now. We are doing most of that now because we have a broader team and we have different departments coming up with different ideas. So, but the origin of everything I mostly do come from a lived experience, which makes me more passionate. I don't give up when I'm trying to solve those problems because I know I have to. I don't know who else is, but I have to be part of the solution as well. So yeah.
I was almost laughing a bit when you talked about how some of the experience, like some of the motivations to going into this field involved, like you watching Iron Man, for example. And I'm curious to know. So before we go further, I want to ask you, what age did you watch how old were you when you first watched Iron Man?
So I think the first time I watched Diamond was 2010. Yeah, that was 2010. And I was 11 at that point. So yeah,
Okay.
that was the very first Iron Man. I know it came out in 2008,
Mhm.
but didn't see it till 2010. And the scene that sparked me was not him flying around and stuff, was when he was in the cave and he was building the suit out of scrap metal. Yo, that was like a blink moment for me. I was like, we were living close to scrap yards or scrap materials, and we even had like a mechanic workshop opposite our house. And my dad was a filmmaker. He had like a lot of cameras, so you would see a lot of moving parts. My mom studied physical electronics. She had like a lot of physics and electronics textbooks in the house. So when you're able to see those things and you're able to like be around that amount of tech, amount of knowledge, it creates this unique moment in time that sparks something in the mind of like of a young person like myself. So yeah, I think yeah, it's funny enough to say it's a series of events, but yeah, for me, I'm still a huge fan of Marvel movies, and I still watch cartoons and anime because it keeps my mind young and creative. Yeah.
I know, obviously, and I think you can agree to this, the fact that we are always a work in progress as human beings. But I do
Yeah.
want to know, because you mentioned that Iron Man was one of your favorite movies growing up, is there a part of you that hopes to one day build an Iron Man suit? Because you love the movies, you kind of have some sort of
Yeah.
resemblance. Is that something you want to look at in the future, or do you feel like it's maybe out of the realm?
I think I remember when people used to I built a robot at a certain time. I used to build rockets and even hand rocket launchers. I built some of those things back in high school and I used scrap metals. Even my robots, if you do see a picture of my robots, they have like a circle light in the center of the chest. Like that's my replacement for an arc reactor. So that was the whole concept then. But I think I had a very serious injury when I was trying to create oh my God, I was trying to create a new type of smoke bomb, and it mistakenly went off, and that almost like it caused a lot of problem. Then I think I saw even when I was trying to take out the bucket in which the mixture was in to throw it out of the room before I could set my entire hostel on fire when I inhaled the smoke, which was the aim at first, that was what I aimed to do, to create something that people can not bear, but at the same time, it wouldn't kill them per se. And I was into chemistry then. So what happened was I experienced how that way technology can actually harm people. And that was the last time I dreamt of building anything that would fly, blast, or explode. So I don't see myself building an Iron Man suit. I see myself building technology that will one day for sure, or designing solutions that will one day for sure be par to par to like amazing futuristic tech that is beyond its time in our current time. I see myself doing that, and we already doing that at Lighted at some level. But no, honestly, it would be cool, but I don't see myself doing that anymore for sure. Yeah.
Well, if it makes you feel slightly better, one of
Yeah.
my favorite superhero growing up was Spider-Man. And
Mm.
just like any childish person, they would think that, oh, one day I'll become Spider-Man. So like there was a time where I'd be like, okay, what is the spider that I need to find so that it can bite me? And then even though I'm gonna be in so much trouble short term, I'm going
Yeah.
to climb, shoot webs. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go on YouTube. What is the spider that bit Spider-Man? And now I realize that, let's see, that was when I was like, what, 6 or 7 years old? Now, as a 22-year-old, spiders are the one thing that I'm scared of the most. So I don't care if that spider makes me become Spider-Man. I am running
Yeah.
as fast as possible. So
Yeah.
yeah, I still love Spider-Man, but hate spiders. So if that makes you feel
Me
any better,
too. Me
there you
too.
go.
I remember at least you did research. I think I would put my hand towards spiders and be like, I want to turn into Spider-Man. And I was like so into the concept of being a superhero as a kid, you know. But then yeah, right now, yo, I am scared of spiders as well. Like if I see a spider, my system is just like yo, nah. So yeah, I totally understand. Also, the analogy you just gave in terms of the type of technology Tony Stark's make, and he inspired me doesn't mean I have to go in that same direction as well. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm glad we shared that sort of weird commonality. But the interesting thing is, and
Yeah.
it sort of leads me to the next thing, which is the fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think when I was getting to know more about you, you were born in Nigeria, based in Rwanda, correct if that's right. But
Yeah, at the moment,
okay.
temporarily. Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that and you mentioned this when you talked about where the idea of helping people comes from, and it comes
Yeah.
from the fact that it's based on personal experiences you had. So whatever thing you went through, you wanted to make sure that it doesn't happen to the next generation or other people.
Yeah.
When it comes to, I guess, representing, and one of the things you care a lot about is like putting a positive image on on Africa and being proud of your African heritage and giving back to communities in Africa. Are you
Yeah.
more excited or are you more pressured? And the reason why I say these two things is that I've asked this a lot, especially when it comes to helping people, because I think people see more on the external stuff. Like if I tried to help you and I failed miserably, you're gonna think I'm
Yeah.
terrible. But internally, internally I understand, or like, but I hope that internally, or maybe I guess on
Mm.
my end, if I failed miserably, I would be like, I hope this person understands that I'm trying to help them. So
Mm.
I guess like when you fail, there's always this idea of like you messed up, even though people don't understand that deep down that you are trying to help. It's just that helping people can be it's not it's much more easier said than done. So that's why I said
Yeah.
the pressure part. But for you personally, as you've gone on to help many people in Africa, are you excited by that opportunity or the pressure because there's always the concern of what could go wrong, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I think I am grateful for is that I know when it comes to tech, a lot can go wrong. I am very, very like relaxed when it comes to projects. Sometimes it is stressful. It is stressful when something goes wrong. But then we understand, okay, how do we fix this? But I am more excited than pressured because this is why I have like a yearly journal where I draw down ideas. Whenever I find out that there is an idea I had maybe 5 years ago that I can use now in the current time to solve problems, I am always really excited and happy that this idea can come to reality. So in terms of you do face problems on ground, you know, and even now, the moment we're scaling our projects, we're building bigger projects, and sometimes it's often politicized or like you have social issues between community dynamics, so that it's more on the psychological end of helping people. You have entitlement from communities thinking, oh, you are supposed to do this, or the government is paying you to do this, you know? So I think the part that I am pressured on is more on how to navigate the psychological and sociological angle of projects, not the technological aspect. The technological aspect, nah, I'm always like, I wake up in like by 2 a.m. and I'm like, I have an idea. I'm sketching this down. Or I wake up 6 a.m. in the morning and I'm sketching, writing down ideas. Or I might be in the bus or on a bike and I'm like, oh, that would be cool, you know? So, yeah, but for the sociological and psychological part, I think that's also something I am learning from, because we are growing, understanding people, hiring people, knowing the right people to have on your team, all those things, the people aspect of things, you know. I think that's something I would say I'm lucky for. A lot of tech people I know do not have the patience or the ability to want to learn how to navigate these scenarios. It's also difficult for me. But yeah, I think I'm more excited than pressured per se. Yeah.
I want to bring back the love you've had for Iron Man, and the reason why I
Yeah.
want to bring that up is that another thing that you talked about was the fact that you don't when it comes to um, personal experiences and your determination to make sure that it doesn't happen again. You
Yeah.
mentioned how you don't want to give up. You want to do everything it takes to
Yeah.
um, to find that solution. And then coupled with the fact that you are excited by, obviously there's pressure when it comes to helping people, but you're excited by that. And obviously you have a passion for giving back to rural communities. Do you feel like, in a sense, that you're a superhero to them? I mean, I know that you're still a human being and that you
Yeah.
are an entrepreneur and a passion about STEM. Obviously, when it comes to superhero, when we think of like a suit, a cape,
Yeah.
these kinds of things. Do you kind of see yourself as that, or do you feel like maybe it's just out of touch? I mean, because when I think of superhero, I think of someone who helps to save communities when they're in need. And I don't know if when you're using light ed or when you're working on light ed, I don't think you have a cape and a suit, but do
Yeah.
you still like, is there a part of it where you kind of have that same feeling as a superhero?
Hmm. That's a very interesting question, you know, because in this line of work, you have a lot of self-doubt, and that happens. People judge themselves, and you will often feel like, oh, am I doing enough? Am I really helping people? So in this context, um I think I shouldn't shrink myself. I have had scenarios where communities have said, wow, you're changing our life. You see women, they dance and they are singing and they want to lift you up and say, thank you. You see a little kid smile just by the light bulb lighting up, and you see a classroom of young people saying, thank you so much. We appreciate you helping our lives. And you know, that's what superheroes are about, you know. Maybe my superpower is to bring light, you know. Maybe my superpower is my brain and it's the ideas I bring into the world. So, and like superheroes, we all have our ups and downs. Yeah, but internally, do I see myself as a superhero? No. Do I know that people see the work we do as as a superpower? Yes, of course. I see that people do feel like we are changing lives, and that's the step one of being a hero in people's life. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
One of the things that I usually talk about on this podcast is that if we use you for example, one of the things that comes to mind is your passion for technology, passion for STEM, using the things that you love so much to make a difference. And I
Mm.
obviously know that STEM is not what makes Stanley you. Like, there's obviously different things that make you you. I know that sounds very philosophical. I say that quite a bit on this podcast, but given that it means so much to you because of the fact that there was a time where you didn't have access to these tools and it affected you. If this is philosophical, so if you don't like this
Yeah.
question, we can cut it. But I do want to ask is, if you were to take STEM or your passion for STEM out of your
Mm.
life, what would you lose? And why I ask that is, like, you don't just lose that thing, but kind of like how when I asked you about if there's a symbolic meaning to curry, there's something, it means more to you. It's not just the idea of creating something or the final product, which is very easy to think about in STEM. There's like
Mm.
this thing where it's like people don't understand how much this means to me, and if it were to be taken away from me, it would change almost the trajectory of my life in a way.
Yeah.
So I don't know how
Same.
much you've used STEM, but because that's something you're passionate about, I am curious as to like
Yeah.
what would your life look like if someone were to take it out of you at any point.
If you took STEM out of my life, I would be still one of the best artists or creatives in general. So I think STEM enables me, but it is not who I am. Internally, I know I'm more of an artist than technologist per se. Because the work I even do at Lighted right now is not entirely hands-on. My role is to come up with the ideas, the design, the way the parts come together, the way the lamps are built, the aesthetics, the process. So I think that's more artistic and architectural kind of, but industrial design in general. But if you take out STEM from my life, yeah, I'll be more of an artist. I'll probably be making feature films or short films, probably be making sculptures and art installations globally as well because I have done filmmaking and I have succeeded at some certain level. I've won like really big global competitions in filmmaking as well. So I don't talk a lot about that part of my career because I decided to pause and focus. I think when you keep growing, you understand. But I will go back to it, but I've not gotten to that place yet when I will return to it. So if you take away STEM from Stanley, Stanley's going to go full on Da Vinci. I think when you talk about people and when you talk about real life people that I connect more with, I think Da Vinci is someone I'm like, yo, this guy is like, he's a tech guy. He designed one of the first designs of helicopters. He's an artist. He's a philosopher. He's a music, he write music. He wrote some couple of scrappy music notes. But that's someone I see myself as like, you should not shrink yourself. You should not put yourself in a box. And I've met people then like people that have met all parts of me. They're like, I can't really put my finger on something about you because I cannot be defined. So yeah, if you take away that, there are more layers to Stanley, but it will be more of the artistic layers for sure. Yeah.
That's really interesting, and I want to touch on that a little bit more because I know that's something that you also are involved in or have some sort of have interest in. So definitely want to revisit that. Um, Now, I do want to ask you, or one of the things, or another thing I want to talk about, I guess maybe regarding with light ed, is the fact that, and you mentioned this when I asked you about the superhero thing, and if you see yourself as a quote unquote superhero, is you talked about how when you are able to make people's day, there's a sense of like, happiness. You said that people will be dancing and because a situation has been solved. And I want to know if there's a specific memory or an emotional moment you had when it comes to light ed. Because I know that we can be inspired by personal events or maybe things we haven't seen before and we thought we could be the person doing it. But there's also times where you can hold on to certain emotions because emotions can be a powerful tool, and it can especially be powerful when it's like it's there's almost like a before and after where before I was going through this and then
Yeah.
after a certain thing happened, it shaped me into a better person. If going back, well, when it comes to light ed, what were some emotional moments you remember where you're like, wow, I can't believe, how much it meant to this person. And based on that emotion, you want to continue carrying that forward because how much it
Yeah.
meant to a specific person. I know you talked about in general, but I want to know if you have like a specific memory in mind.
I think um so at the same time we have a team, a very, very good team. Some of them are my friends and we've been working for like 8 years, 5 years, 4 years. But they are the ones that do majority of the groundwork in Nigeria because I travel a lot. But I also handle the very tedious parts. I was lucky enough, I would say lucky enough, to be on one of our field projects, and that was happening in a IDP camp, an internally displaced people camp, and I saw the living conditions of people there, and It was painful. Trust me, it was very painful. When it got dark, we planned to stay over, but we couldn't because it was a horrible living condition. I was like, get me out of here. I can't stay here. It is bad. There was a lot of mosquitoes. There was no light. It was completely dark. And that was the day before we installed the solutions because we wanted to see how the experience was actually. Afterwards, I remember having a call after we installed the solutions and left. The manager called me and he was like, that we God bless us that his boy is currently studying right now beside him, and the women are now being able to like sit down and have meetings at night without being scared. Um, and most of them are happy that they have proper lighting solutions in their tent. That there made me want to cry over the phone. Another experience that I think there are multiple, but I'll just give to was a school in a very remote area. They've not had lights in a very long time, and we couldn't travel there because it was a very unsafe remote area. So what we did is we had a partner, we sent the solutions to them. They installed it, and same thing, a call. This wasn't even physical experience, and he put on the voice, like the speaker to the kids, and they all shouted, "Thank you so much. We really appreciate. Now we are not scared. We can study without lamps and candles." Yo, I was like, I remember calling my co-founder and I told him, hey, his name is also Stanley. I was like, hey, Stan, man, this is just what happened. And he was like, this is why we do what we do, you know? So yeah, I think those experiences make you feel like I want to do more. Trust me, within the next 1 year, especially next year, I'm sure, especially next year, the project like it is going to be, the projects we are going to be doing are going to be boom, mind blowing in the tech space and access to energy and recycling in general. So for sure, so excited to on the tech side. I'm always excited to see how our ideas grow from the pages of our notes to the reality of prototyping and testing and to the reality of it changing people's lives. So in those two aspects, the tech and the impact, always excited and it always touches me to see a very rough, ugly sketch from my notebooks because I'm horrible at sketching comes out and it's real, and I see someone using it, and I'm like, hmm, yeah, that's priceless in general.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And it goes back to the fact that, like I said, that it's one thing to build things and do things that you're very passionate about, but then
Yeah,
it's also meaningful when the things that you're passionate the things that you're passionate about, you're using it to help people and you see how much it means to them. So that's
yeah,
thank you for sharing that. Um, I want to now transition into filmmaking because I know that's another thing that's a part of you. And
yeah.
tell me a bit about that part. Like, tell me a bit about the relationship and I guess how that started. And
Mm,
because I mean, I, I mean, you and I, we both love movies, but it's one thing to watch a movie. It's another thing to be involved in it. So tell me a bit about that relationship from the moment you started to where it is now today, even though you are in a break, I think.
So I think filmmaking was something I picked up seeing my dad make films. He worked with a lot of popular Nigerian celebrities back in the days, and we met a few of them, and mm, that those experiences were like amazing. Seeing people you see on the TV or the telly, and you're seeing them in real life, and you're like, oh, this is cool, you know. And I remember I would brag to my classmates and steal pictures from our cabinets to take to school to show them, hey, I've met this person, I've met that person. But then the fascination for movies didn't come from me loving movies. It came from me loving stories. I think I loved storytelling. Oh, so much. I love storytelling. And I think seeing watching some short films why I love short films is they are very simple, they have a very complex story, they have a high and lows, compact, maximum 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending. But then I think the passion came from telling stories for impact. So my dad was a filmmaker, but I didn't want to be the same type of filmmaker he was, of course. I wanted to do something different in my own way to define myself. So the first film I made was a short film for a competition. It was for a science competition. Funny enough, we were asked to write an essay. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to pull this extra. And I was like, you know what? I wrote my essay in form of a script. I wrote literally the voiceover of the film was my essay. So after submitting the essay, it was supposed to be 250 words exact. I wrote 250 words and I took those 250 words. I wrote 249 and I put the YouTube link to that film as the film, the last one. And I remember, oh no, it's not 200, it's 500 words. Yeah, it's 500 words. I remember shooting that film, writing the script. It was hectic. I had a friend of mine, he had a camera. We went around. I was living in Morocco at that time. So we went around the city, shot it in different scenes. I was the actor, I was the director, I was the scriptwriter. So after that, I won $5,000 from that competition. And I was like, okay, this is cool. I can make money from this as well, you know. But then the trajectory of filmmaking and tech in my life back in 2019, they were same. Like no one was doing better than the other. Um, so what I did then was when I went back to Nigeria, I did before I went back to Nigeria, I did my first official film that was not for a competition, it was just a film, and it was called Introspection. It was me. What I did was I called some of the ladies I knew, I talked to, I called my sister, I called my aunt, and I kind of asked them they should define Stanley, you know, who is Stanley to you? They said a lot of things. And what I did is I saw the character definition. I split it into two and told those two different characters in one film, one story. Define those characters about what people said, but define those characters in my journey in film, in art, and in tech. And that was what came about introspection. It was low budget. I didn't achieve anything per se with that film. It was really, I think it was therapy for me as well. But then afterwards, I went back to Nigeria. I did one film in our local language. It's called Ichodo, which means finding peace. And I did that film in a very remote forest. And we did it with just $16. I think after that, I was able to raise over $700 with that film. That was amazing and awesome as well. Not competitions, they were mostly streams, and it was cool. Mostly film festivals and some local theaters in Berlin and some other places. And it was cool seeing people saying that even though my film was low quality, it was very, very, very poetic in the wordings and everything. And yeah, but then my tech career started to push higher. And then I had to see the struggle. But then most of the work, the videos we do for Lighted, my pitch videos are often storytelling as well. But then I think we're planning next year. A lot of big things are happening next year. We're planning to do a kind of a docu-story film, kind of something. It's going to be a narration of a real life scenario, but a story that's happening. And I've not said this anywhere before, so so yeah, we're planning to make that. Really going to be cool. So I'm trying to see how do bring in the films we make films I want to make into Lighted to tell our stories for branding, marketing, fundraising. Yeah, but I think filmmaking for me is always going to be part of me. I love the writing stories. Recently I did a gallery walk. I wrote the entire storyline for over 30 characters. very short storylines about 30 characters. It was fun. It was an exhibition in Dubai, sorry, in Sharjah in the UAE. So that was also amazing for me to be able to push my storytelling abilities into a different direction. So for me, I think filmmaking is something that I started out of pure passion, not to solve any problem, just to tell stories, my stories, people's stories. But right now, I think I will start it again, but it will be connected to the work we do. Maybe in the future, of course, I want to make some superhero movies. Of course, it is in the back of my head to come up with characters designed based on old stories of African old stories. So going to be working on that in the future, making some animations, of course, of high classic local stories that we grew up with and character designs. But that might be maybe in my 40s or 50s, I don't know. But the funny thing is, I always say I'll do this in my churches, and I end up doing it next 2 years or next 3 years. So whenever you see me post that online and I'm like, then just know it's then. I'm not putting in a timeline, but my current mindset is in a long run. But if I do find that synergy, I'm going to start for sure. Yeah.
That's awesome. I do have three things I want to ask you before I let you go. The first of
Sure.
which is let's pretend that you are a filmmaker right now. And
Hmm.
one of the things that I saw throughout the research I was doing is the fact that you take a lot of pride in your African heritage.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I talk about on the podcast on my podcast, and I think you also share this as well, is the importance of perspective and knowing that
Hmm.
it's not as clear cut or it's not as
Yeah.
straightforward as it seems. There's a lot of things that you just don't know about that unfortunately aren't covered. So
Yeah.
where I come from, well, where my parents come from, South Asia, South Asia, people usually attribute South Asia as poverty stricken,
Mm.
corruption,
Yeah.
crime, sometimes, infighting. And it's like, I understand, and it sucks. It sucks because unfortunately it happens, but more importantly, there are other things that you just don't see that there's a beauty in these countries. So, for example, like I know I mentioned
Yeah.
South Asia, Bangladesh is actually the country where my parents are from. So recently, we just overthrew our government, and now we're having like a transition into um,
Yeah.
a new government. But people usually think of South Asian countries as this like corruption, poverty stricken, like these like all these bad things. And the reason why I say that is when it comes to what I hear about Africa, it's sort of similar where it's like, oh, it's poverty stricken, there's corruption, there's not much exciting things going on. It's a lot of like guilt, but I feel like people like you, for example, might maybe paint a better picture of what Africa is like. So I want to ask you, like, what would you say? What were you, like if when people say like, what is Africa like? People would think of usually like the worst possible things they can say. But as someone who's actually a part of that community, I know Africa is a continent, but obviously, you've been able to interact with different communities. What would you say Africa is like? Because people will say the negative stuff, but I'm sure that you can say that, okay, maybe there are unfortunate things that happen, but there are also positive things or a lot of good things that can happen, but people don't usually talk about that because there's not much coverage, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking me that question. Oftentimes when I see some other change makers or impacts or entrepreneurs are solving crucial problems, and often see the way their organizations communicate about our continent. I know it's important to share problems, but for me, I think it's important to share problems in a way that people still understand that they are still brilliant minds. They are still wonderful people. They are still passionate people on this continent and people that are facing these problems. And I often do this by sharing my own personal experience. I rarely tell stories of people that we worked with. I used to do that early on in my career, but then I was like, no, this is not what I want to do. I've had people ask me in interviews, so is it true that Africa is really suffering right now? I'm like, no. Like me, I live in Rwanda. there's 24 hours electricity. Um, I've lived in Morocco. I've lived in multiple African countries, and I will tell you, there are good roads, there are good food, they are very classic hotels and very exotic places that I can't even afford. And those places are better than some places I've seen in the US or in New York City, for example. I've seen places in Accra, Ghana, that you can't find that amount of beauty and calmness and tranquility in New York, for example. Not in New York is a bad place, but I don't like New York personally. It's too crowded for me. But yeah, in general, what I'm saying is Africa is beautiful. Africa is filled with amazing, young, very young people that have ideas, passion, and want to change the world in their own small ways. Of course, there are problems. There's poverty, there's chaos in some countries, there are wars, but beyond that, even the work we do at Lighted, we don't take out the community from the equation. They are part of the process, you know. So it is a beautiful place with smiles. If you go on our social media, you're going to see that at Lighted social media, you're going to see mostly smiles. You're going to mostly see how the solution helps. And people often tell me, why don't you communicate the problem in a very painful and sad way? And I've had this problem with some PR agencies where I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. I can't tell the story the way you want me to tell the story. I want to tell it this way that still communicates the problem, but also shows people that these people are willing to work for their solutions as well. I'm not playing savior. Um, I'm not being a messiah to these people. At the same time, I want to help them by providing them access to the tools that they need to help themselves. And I also want to project that, Africans, we are really smart people, hardworking and very endearing people. I've been in different contexts. I've even had people, especially the place I come from in Nigeria, it's like known for trading. It's not known for anything technology advanced or anyway. And I've seen people met my fellow Nigerians in a conference and they're like, what is that? Where are you from? I'm like, Onitsha. They're like, really? Do people do tech there? And I'm like, yes, we do. We are the first generation that will do it, and we'll do it better than anyone in the country. Just wait for us. So like I said, I watch anime. So I often take inspiration from a lot of anime characters. That ability not to give up, to represent, to show the power and the pride of where we come from, even as small as it can be. But in this context, Africa is not small. Africa is giants. We are made of giants. And no matter where you go in the world, the funny thing is the countries that the globe always condemns for those bad things, when you go to leadership positions and actual change on a global scale, you find more people from those places in those contexts. So yeah, no matter what anyone says for me, I wouldn't like to live long term in Europe or in America. Maybe for studies or for programs or for fellowships. But yo, I love Africa. This is my home place. I could get a scholarship to study in any university if I wanted to, right now and at the moment. But no, maybe for my master's or PhD, yes, you need proper advanced education and resources. And sadly, we've not had those resources in this part of the world. And that's why people like us have to get those things to learn how to get them back home. So definitely. But in general, Africa is beautiful. Simple. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm not going to lie, when I was asking that question, I was a bit
Mm,
worried because I was worried like I didn't want to like I was worried that the
mm,
way I said it was going to come off wrong because I mean I'm not from Africa. So,
mm.
for example, I've asked a question similar to people who come from the Middle East. And
Yeah.
when they hear Middle East, they'll think somewhat similar where it's like, "Oh, war, people go to war, there are
Mm,
terrorists, they like to blow up things." And that's unfortunately what people hear, but then when I get to
mm,
interact with them, that's I mean, they'll say something similar to you. It's like we have a lot of beauty in the Middle East. It's not what you just see in the news or in the media. There are other things as well. So it's really important in understanding perspective because just because of what you hear from external sources is
Yeah,
not the full story. So having these conversations and getting to learn more about what people's heritage is like and what it means to them, you understand that there's more to things than what is seen. If just because you see
true.
1% of it doesn't mean it's the full story. So I do appreciate you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Um,
Awesome.
Now, you are, like I said, you now, as you mentioned, you're in filmmaking and you're and also in tech. One of the things I struggle with, whether I'm studying for my major or doing podcasting, is
Mhm.
overthinking. And you may have noticed I was overthinking quite a few
Yeah.
times on this podcast because I love asking like these
Um,
unique questions. Which one do you feel like you had more of an issue when it comes to overthinking? Because it's one thing to just say be yourself and the
mhm.
best work can come. But sometimes when you're trying to do your best, you think, am I doing this right? Is this, what if
Mhm.
I'm doing too much? What if I'm not doing enough?
Yeah.
Which aspect, technology, or I guess when you're in the tech version or in filmmaking, do you find that you see yourself overthinking a lot? Or do you feel like you overthink equally? Tell me about that experience.
I don't think I overthink in tech or filmmaking. When it comes to my creative process, I flow. Like I'm like, you know what? If you don't like it, it's your problem. But in tech, of course, you have to be critical. Not overthinking per se, but critical. Critical in the way of you have to make sure everything is okay because this is something someone is going to use. If you don't do it well, it would affect the person's life. The aspect I think is in my own personal mind space and how personal self, interacting with people. Sometimes I think, oh, people often have different descriptions of me. People will tell you, oh, is it Stanley? He has pride. Oh, he's ignorant, or he's sorry, not ignorant, he's arrogant. Oh, he doesn't like associating with people. I think those aspects of my life, I often overthink it because I'm like, yo, guys, that's not me. Me is talk. I love talking. I love eating. I love traveling. I love talking. I literally love talking a lot. I love sharing my experience. I love helping people. I have a lot of people that reach out to me. Hey, I'm applying for this. Can you help me out? I'm like, yeah, sure, sure. This is what I think can help you. This is what I think can help you. And often people get this from my social media as well. Sometimes it could be overwhelming seeing all these awards. I think those things are important to post because it helps connect you to the people that will help you. I come from a very um kind of almost poor family per se, and you have to work really hard to get out from poverty at some certain level. So you have to put out the work you do. So I often overthink, even right now, and I'm overthinking it right now as I'm speaking to you. I'm thinking, oh, what if someone sees this? So that is the aspect of my life I overthink when it comes to how I relate to people or how people see me. Am I doing too much? Am I achieving a lot? But then I have a quote. It's like a very big sticker on my wall. It's like, self-compassion, make your own table, don't filter yourself. Those things, I see them and I often remind myself, okay, you have to be okay. But for my work, especially my filmmaking and storytelling, I really don't think too much about it. I let myself flow. I let myself dream like a baby and like a kid. But yeah, I think we all overthink at some capacity. I often overthink, oh, would these people like me? Would they judge me? Would they see me different? Would they just conclude that this is who I am? So not identity crisis. I know who I am. I know myself. I know what I want and what I don't want. But basically, I often overthink, how would the world see me at the end of the day? Will the world just think of me in a specific way? But something I've also learned is that the people that matter will see you for who you are. And that's it. Yeah.
My last question is somewhat philosophical, but I'm going to go ahead
Mm.
and ask it. I know that, it's one thing when we see things on social media or articles or awards,
Yeah.
we see one side of a person, but we don't
Yeah.
always see the other side, the things that are behind closed doors or the day-to-day
Yeah.
process. Right now, what would you say is the hardest part about being Stanley?
I remember seeing this question. I was like, yo, I kept thinking about the answer. Um, hmm, I think the hardest part about being Stanley is the amount of workload I have on my table. Yo, it's a lot of work, you know. I'm like emails, the documents, the presentations, the traveling. It's too much. Like in October, even on my birthday, I'll be on a plane. So yeah, I think the workload is the hardest part about being me now. Honestly, apart from that, I'm super chill. I know the direction I want to go in life. I think I know things always change, you know, something can happen and direction shifts, or something small, something big, something impactful, something positive or negative. So, but for now, at where I am, I'm still figuring out myself, and I'm at peace that things change. But when it comes to hardest part about being me, apart from what people see be on the social media articles, on when you even Google my name right now and you see all those things, the truth is, for me to get to those places, hmm, it took a very, very painful amount of dedication, pain, hard work. I think we often say this, but it's cliche at this point, but it's just the reality. It takes blood, sweat, and tears to get to where we are. And in my context, I work in the hardware space. So it literally took blood because you have a lot of injuries. But yeah, the workload and yeah. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful for everything. I'm grateful for the achievements, and I'm grateful for the workload because I know if I didn't have this workload, I would probably be just lazy and chilling, you know. But the hardest part of about being me is knowing when to rest. Um, so I think that's it. Knowing when to rest. I'm learning that. I'm learning that. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I know that, it's tough because there's so much to balance, but I'm glad that in a way that you're embracing them and you're doing it because you want to continue making an
Yeah,
impact. So, Stanley, I just want to say thank you so much for joining the podcast. I know that you have a very busy schedule and so much traveling that you have to do, but nevertheless, I hope you get to embrace and enjoy every moment. And, I know it's been difficult because we're both really busy with school and everything else, but I'm glad we got to make this work. So thank you so much for joining the podcast, and I hope we get to meet in person, whether it's in Africa or in Nigeria, Rwanda, or in the United States. I'm from Columbus,
definitely.
Ohio, so it's not like New York. So if you ever come, please feel free to say hi, and I'm sure we'll have a bowl of curry.
Definitely, definitely. I'll put that on my bucket list. I think I travel to the US a lot, so I'm looking towards that as well. And thank you so much for having me. I think what you're doing is I know it's not globally big at this point, but honestly, I just want to tell you, keep doing what you're doing. I've listened to some of your work and I'm like, this is cool. And for me, even having these conversations, there's human element to the conversations that we just had, and just keep doing the amazing work. Honestly, the work you're doing inspires your young people like me to start to keep on going and to start in general. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Please continue to support the podcast in the future, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.